Ladies and gentlemen, we have 5 major battles of the Pacific Theater, featuring the new Japanese faction versus the Americans. Can the Japanese overcome their failures and survive? Let's find out. In this first battle, we have
a date which will live in infamy.
A surprise attack. The Japanese, with their many airplanes in the sky. The Americans, they had no idea what was coming. So immediately we got the Japanese coming in, destroying whatever is left of the Americans. The Americans did not have good aerial technology. Terrible against the Zero. Can you imagine being one of these American soldiers looking up, realizing Hawaii is under attack? Right now we're watching the Americans fend off massive Japanese fighters. The Americans, their airfield is still operational. Here we go, a Japanese dive bomber right now. Boom, just took out an AA gun. Looks like the Japanese are still alive. They still actually have some kamikaze planes somehow. We have more planes going up for the Americans. Every single second this airfield is alive, the Americans have more of a chance counter the Japanese Air Force. 6 kamikazes from the Japanese just hit Pearl Harbor. A small U.S. victory. Whilst the battle was raging in Pearl Harbor, the Japanese brutally attacked and attempted an invasion of Wake Island. We got tons of American planes diving down and hitting multiple Japanese tanks right off the bat. Looks like a Japanese bomber couldn't control itself. Actually, these are Japanese paratroopers landing on top of the American tanks. We have Japanese Hagos and Marines coming up through the front lines right now. Here comes the main battlefield. We have Hagos charging in. It looks like the leads of the Shermans are coming down. A massive front happening here. 4 Japanese paratroopers are hitting the ground. Japanese have had a very capable Marine and troop force in the beginning. Imagine being this poor little sniper tower and sniping whatever the heck you can. There are so many Japanese Marines coming to the battlefield, but the longer Japanese take, the more the Americans in the factories are able to produce. The Japanese have actually gotten air superiority over the Battle of Wake. Somehow, it looks like the Japanese might be successful in this battle. We have lots of bombing runs going down for the Japanese. Here comes some more American tanks now. So we have a massive strike, what looks like artillery or a massive explosion. It took out a lot of Japanese Marines. The factory is severely damaged, and only it is a couple hits away from fully being destroyed for the Americans. It looks like the Zeros are going to take it out. This fight is so close. This is a literal health bar away. If someone breathes on this factory, it will die. There it goes. Their production facility is down. American victory, but with heavy casualties. The Americans are suffering horrible defeats and loss of life. The Japanese are bringing everything they got to break them. Can the Americans turn it around at the Battle of Midway? So off the bat, we have Japanese Marines charging against a massive American Sherman assault, charging directly into the Sherman firefight. This is an intense battle right in the beginning. If we look into the skies, we just are watching a total air devastation. So many units are being taken down. Japanese have actually gotten a few German Panthers. We have a massive battle for the middle engaging. The Japanese tanks have somehow won and are charging across Midway. The air fight is still on. It looks like the Americans have won the air war. But the longer the Americans are allowed to survive, the more their factories will produce. Watching the crab tanks come down in the Battle of Midway. So many Shermans are charging against the Japanese. Lots of Japanese planes are still going down. The Americans still have mobile AA up in the air. The Americans also have their B-29 bombers bombing away. The Japanese are going to take as many as they can before they go. They have so many Panthers shooting at the Americans down here. But just look at the carnage, ladies and gentlemen. Tons and tons of destruction. This Panther is taking a lot of American tanks. These islands were bombed to nothing. Horrible deaths on both sides. The Americans have lost so many troops in these fights. So many American casualties compared to the Japanese. The Americans have decisively won Midway. The Americans must continue on the fight and march across the Pacific Theater at all costs. The Japanese, after suffering a major defeat at the Battle of Midway, are now fighting for every single island. We come to the Battle of Philippines. We have tons of units attacking. The Japanese has some rocket troops. Massive air war take place. Lots of American dive bombers at the Japanese tanks, taking so many of them out. Some of the Japanese Zeros have also taken out the back rank of the American. The American reinforcements are down, but multiple Shermans are charging the Japanese infantry. But the Japanese infantry are not retreating. As a matter of fact, they're charging in at the fray of these American hordes, completely outnumbered. Banzai charging against the Americans. Charging at tanks, charging at Marines. Japanese still have their barracks producing lots of infantry. It's about to go down. Like the American planes are about to take this out. Here comes some more Japanese troops now. The American infantry is finally arriving with the American reinforcements. We have a massive Japanese force holding the line against these Americans. Still have Hagos left, of course. Hagos are still alive. Got a Zero chasing a Mustang up here. There it goes. Zeros are still very formidable. They've been fighting for years in this war. Japanese won't take no for an answer. If they run out of ammo, they will kamikaze. But in the front down below, Japanese are advancing, holding this island with everything they've got. The amount of troops that died here is absolutely staggering. The Americans still have Hellcats. The Americans still have one dive bomber. The Japanese still have infantry producing buildings. And ladies and gentlemen, they'll fight for whatever it takes. They will eventually run out of infantry at these islands. This was a decisive but brutally devastating victory for the Americans. The Americans are having success in their island hopping campaign, but they needed to strike a final blow and attacked Iwo Jima, the final island on their way towards Japan. Let's go! We have the ninjas charging in. Japanese are coming against the American onslaught. And don't even get me started about the air and the sky. We have Japanese tanks approaching on the prowl. We have so many Americans on the other side advancing as well. Heavy American tanks are in this battle. The amount of infantry that just died in this beginning assault is absolutely insane. We actually are getting some tactical bombing runs from the Americans, hitting the barracks. There goes a barracks for the Japanese. It has been knocked out. But as we get closer to the ground, you can just see the carnage of this Japanese battle. These troops are charging in what seems like an unstoppable numbers advantage by the Americans. Here comes the American tank assault. The Japanese dropping whatever they can against the Americans, dropping on top of their tank unit. Insane. The Japanese actually have some of their anti-air units turned against the tanks because they have nothing to hit these tanks with at this point. But the Japanese still have many infantry, still producing, still coming out against the Americans. Whenever the Americans charge, it's a hard fight against the Japanese. Both of the barracks are knocked out. It is anyone's game at this point. Who is going to win this battle? We are watching the Sherman charge in. There it goes. Japanese are charging in, moving with their infantry assault. Some Shermans coming up the prowl, taking out so much infantry from the Japanese. Air battle is decided firmly for the Japanese. Somehow they have won the air battle. Japanese forces have run dry. The Americans have countered. The Americans have won. In the aftermath of Iwo Jima, the Americans questioned if an invasion would be worth it. They decided an unbelievable option, a quicker option, the nuclear option. Kaboom!